is Zeta Wexler, and the case vignette I'm covering is called The Near Death of a Salesman. Just a quick trigger warning, I will be talking about suicide, physician-assisted suicide, and everything like that, so if you don't want to hear that, please skip the presentation. So for my case vignette, Dr. Miller is a psychologist who consults with the local nursing homes and hospitals when a patient's capacity to make medical decisions is in question. Dr. Miller receives an urgent call from an attorney to evaluate Willie Lohman at a local trauma unit. The attorney explains that Mr. Lohman is looking for an objective opinion about his ability to make medical decisions. Mr. Lohman is a 52-year-old male with a wife and 2 kids who are both in college. He works as a financially successful salesman. Over the previous weekend, Mr. Lohman was involved in a serious boating accident. He did not experience any head trauma, however, his physical situation is dire. The trauma team needs his consent to perform a life-saving surgery. If successful, Mr. Lohman can live many years. However, there is a high probability that he will require full-time nursing care. Mr. Lohman has been an active man who enjoyed many physical activities. Furthermore, he believes if he has the surgery and ends up confined to a lifetime of nursing care, he will exhaust all the funds he has saved for the benefit of his family. Mr. Lohman believes that he will be an emotional burden to his family and lose his dignity. Knowing that he will be physically compromised and a burden to his family, Mr. Lohman is asking to die in peace. He does not want to live in an incapacitated state of existence. Without the surgery, Mr. Lohman can be kept alive for about 2 weeks. The family filed an emergency petition to obtain guardianship. The trauma team believes that the patient is not thinking clearly about his demise. They've already called in their psychiatrist consultant. Upon examination, Dr. Miller finds Mr. Lohman's mental status is within normal limits. He demonstrates appropriate memory capabilities and reasoning skills. He articulates his dilemma well and understands that he will die without surgery. There is no evidence of hallucinations, delusions, or psychotic processes. In order to clarify his thinking, Dr. Miller calls you to review the case. So now I'll be looking at this case via Wilfield's ethical decision-making model. Step 1 is to be sensitive to the moral dimensions of counseling, which is defined as having insight into how your own personal values, principles, and worldview will impact your decision-making process. I am a strong supporter of the right to die and die with dignity movements that outline physician-assisted suicide and passive medical methods of euthanasia. I have experienced a life-altering injury that has impacted my lifestyle and will likely limit me for the rest of my life. While this isn't to the extent of Mr. Lohman, I do have, some experience with that. My husband's grandfather recently passed away after several years of intensive care and at least a year and a half of around-the-clock care from both his family and the facility he was moved to. I unfortunately saw the burnout and stress it caused. Step number 2, define the dilemma. First is the situation. Mr. Lohman wants to die naturally. He is demonstrating a typical mental status with clear articulation and reasoning skills. His family and trauma team do not think he's in the right mind. His family is fighting to obtain guardianship and get him the surgery he needs to survive, believing they have his best interest at heart. The client. Dr. Miller was contacted by an attorney on behalf of Mr. Lohman. Therefore, Mr. Lohman is the client. The stakeholders. Mr. Lohman's family, his wife, and 2 adult children, as well as Mr. Lohman himself, are the stakeholders in this case. Cultural considerations. Physician-assisted suicide, even passive, which is what this is a very divisive movement in the United States, as shown by the earlier graphic. Just for definition reason, passive euthanasia is the removal of life support versus active euthanasia is something like lethal injection. In this case, Mr. Lohman would be advocating for passive euthanasia. Step 3, define the central issue and options. First is non-maleficence, which is defined as avoiding actions that cause harm by the ACA Code of Ethics. Additionally, Section A4A of the Code of Ethics outlines that counselors are to act in a way that avoids harm to their clients and/or minimize unavoidable harm. If you deem the patient competent, he will die. If you deem the patient incompetent, you'll likely cause the patient mental harm. Veracity is dealing truthfully with those you come in professional contact with. Mr. Lohman does not have any abnormal mental status. However, his family and trauma team believe he is not thinking clearly due to his accident and the decision he wants to make. Do you only report your findings, or do you take into account what his family and trauma team think? Perhaps the most important in this case is the principle of autonomy, or the right of a person to choose the direction of one's life. In this case, Mr. Lohman has the right to choose not to get a surgery. However, if he's deemed incompetent, he's unable to provide the consent needed, and therefore his family would be able to consent to the surgery. Finally, Section A4B says that counselors should be aware of and avoid imposing their own values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. My initial reaction is to deem Mr. Lohman mentally competent and let him die with dignity. However, this is heavily in line with my own personal values, and I need to critically assess how much this plays into my final decision. Step 4. Refer to the professional standards and examine relevant laws and regulations, if any. I'm currently in Washington State, which has the Death with Dignity Act updated as recently as July 2023 for terminally ill patients. By the legal definition, Mr. Lohman is not terminally ill. However, this act allows for active and passive physician-assisted suicide. Like I said earlier, active would be something like lethal injection, while passive means withholding life-saving care or taking someone off life support and letting them pass away naturally. This is the definition that would most aptly describe Mr. Lohman's situation. Despite Mr. Lohman not having underlying illness, his concern about the financial implications becoming a burden, losing autonomy, and dying with dignity matched directly with the end-of-life concerns that patients who died via assisted suicide in 2023 reported. Step 5. Search out ethical scholarship. According to Worth Jr., in 1999, the ACA as an institution acknowledged that a mental health professional has a duty to inform authorities about clear and imminent threat to themselves. Yet they also signed a petition to the Supreme Court that mental health professionals should be able to have these end-of-life discussions with clients without breaking their confidentiality. They also later released a statement that, quote, "It is imperative to express its position regarding the ability of terminally ill adults to choose the manner and hasten their time of death," unquote. Though this statement is older, it still upholds the current values of the ACA as indicated by their 2014 publication. According to another article, the American Medical Association's Code of Ethics state that a patient has a right to, quote, "make decisions on his or her health care and to refuse recommended treatments," unquote. Finally, a paper published by Disability Handicap and Society outlines arguments for and against voluntary passive euthanasia and concludes that those who should not qualify are persons under 18, those with religious obligations and objections, and those who do not have the mental capacity to consent. Those who do qualify for passive euthanasia are adults who are mentally capable of consenting to the process. This brings us back to Mr. Lohman. Again, though all these sources are old, they are founded on universal ethical principles that are still practiced today. Step 6. Consult with supervisors and colleagues. While I did not discuss this case with a supervisor, I did discuss it with my husband, who has differing views than I do on this subject. He mentioned he wasn't sure someone could consent to death, as there was no way to revoke this consent at the very end should they wish. He also asked, can someone be deemed mentally competent if they are wishing for death? If a person wanted to commit suicide, that would be an issue regardless of the reasons, so why should this be any different? Finally, he brought up the issues Canada is experiencing since physician-assisted suicide is legal there. The rates of this service have increasingly gone up since being legalized in 2016, and there are several cases of people applying for and receiving euthanasia for minor things such as hearing loss, and people with disabilities receiving it due to mounting bills from their condition. While I acknowledge that this isn't the exact case for Mr. Lohman, it does present an argument for not allowing euthanasia of any kind. Step 7. Deliberate and decide. I believe it is the right decision to deem Mr. Lohman mentally competent to make his own medical decisions. Despite the opinion of his family and trauma team that he isn't in his right mind, they have also acknowledged that the accident caused no head trauma, and any exams by Dr. Miller indicated that Mr. Lohman was of sound mind. Though there is a conflict between non-maleficence and client autonomy, the American Counseling Association believes it is right to respect the client's wishes to die with dignity on their terms in cases of adults with terminal conditions. Beneficence compels us to act in the best interest of a client's mental health. Mr. Lohman, not his family, is the client. Because of the reasons outlined by Mr. Lohman, I believe handing over guardianship to his family would greatly harm his mental health as his physical ability deteriorates and he has much lower quality of life, one that he's explicitly stated he does not want. At this point, step 8 would be to inform a supervisor and document, which obviously does not apply to this. Finally, step 9, reflect on the experience. I believe that although my personal values do align with my ultimate decision, knowing that this would lead to his death, I still believe that ethical principles drew me to this conclusion. I was not able to find case studies on this exact situation of an injury instead of an illness, but as both conditions were terminal, I found the literature to be comparable. The same themes from the case study are present with real patients who have received euthanasia. I didn't feel swayed by the family's arguments personally. I did briefly consider their wishes, but as Mr. Lohman is the client and all of his mental evaluations were typical, I believe it would have been unethical to act on their wishes. All right, thank you guys.